In business communication, storytelling has been talked about for years. I've noticed that storytelling divides people into two camps: those who adore it and those who don't use it because they fear it. I call myself a storytelling symmetrist. Why? I'll explain in a moment. I remember over a year ago when I was supposed to conduct a presentation training. An HR lady approached me and said, "Piotr, when you speak, please don't use the word storytelling." "Why?" I asked. To which HR lady replied, "Because, our CEO will be present at the training and he really dislikes that term. Once we sent employees to a storytelling workshop, and after that, they started telling long digressions at board meetings, completely unrelated to the topic. The meetings started to drag on, and instead of helping, the CEO feels like storytelling only harmed us." So that wasn't a storytelling, that was story wars. I'm a big fan of storytelling, but not a fanatic. I see a thin line between storytelling and telling digressions. Unfortunately, inexperienced speakers often cross that line. They cross it unknowingly, groping around, and then it turns into common babbling. Good storytelling is about telling stories that have three characteristics. First, these stories are closely related to the topic. The story serves as an example, confirming the thesis presented in the presentation or a speech. So, storytelling is not a digression. Off-topic is not storytelling. Small talk is not storytelling. Secondly, these are stories tailored to the circumstances, purpose, and the audience. It's about helping to build a good relationship with the audience and also helping to get closer to the goal we set for our speech or a presentation. In this aspect, it's crucial that the told story appeals not only to us, but it is interesting and engaging primarily for the audience. Thirdly, the story must be short. The shorter, the better. I recommend incorporating anecdotes and stories no longer than 2 minutes into a longer speech, ideally if they fit within a minute. And often the most brilliant ones last only 20 seconds. An example is one of the stories I use during simple communication trainings. Napoleon visiting a small town. Surprised that there were no cannon salutes to greet him, he asks the mayor, "Why didn't you fire the cannons in my honor?" To which the mayor replies, "There are 20 reasons. Firstly, we don't have cannons." To which Napoleon says, "Thank you, the first reason is enough." With this anecdote, I achieve several results. I introduce lightness and humor, but even more importantly, I introduce a thread with this story that I want to stick firmly in the audience memory. That we should always start any enumerations with the most important arguments. And just like the quoted story with Napoleon, the first argument is indisputable. Yes, sometimes 20 seconds are enough to support our thesis with a strong example. Generally speaking, storytelling is therefore about telling stories. We know that already. However, few people realize how effective it is. And it is effective because it has been with us for thousands of years. It has not only become ingrained in our culture, but also ingrained in the way our brains function. Storytelling is the first educational and entertainment system of humanity. Our ancestors living in the caves passed on knowledge through generations precisely through stories. Our brains have learned to reward us listening to them attentively. Those who did not listen when the elders told stories about escaping from pursuing animals had little chance of survival. If they didn't listen, they didn't know how to behave in extreme situations. Those who listened survived. They also had a good time listening to stories. And that's how it has remained with us to this day. When we hear someone starting to tell a story, we involuntarily perk up our ears and expect the pleasure of listening. The brain rewards us for listening with a cocktail of pleasure hormones: dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. That's how it works in everyday life. And it also works in business circumstances. So let's not be afraid of storytelling. It's an exceptionally effective communication tool. It's worth equipping ourselves with it and have it in our communication toolkit. As I mentioned at the beginning, I like to call myself a storytelling symmetrist. That is, I know that storytelling has tremendous power, but it's not always and everywhere that this power can be utilized. Sometimes it can work to our disadvantage. My thesis, which I've been proclaiming for several years now, goes like this. In business communication, two communication modes work best. One is called storytelling, the other is called simple communication. When to use one and when the other? Use storytelling when we want to persuade, inspire, or change someone's attitude, especially when we expect that our argumentation may encounter significant skepticism and criticism and resistance. Yes, storytelling works best in such situations. The second communication mode is simple communication. We can use it when our task is to inform, instruct, or explain to someone. This mode is particularly useful when we expect a receptive attitude from the interlocutor. So, if, for example, our task is to present a report on the latest quarterly results, simple communication will work best. That is, structurally, logically telling about the results of the last quarter according to the recommendation, from the general to the particular, from general to details. On the other hand, if our task is to convince the management team to increase the budget of our department, storytelling will work better. That is, arranging our narrative in a specific formula. What formula? I'll explain it in detail in a moment, but first, I want to clarify a few things. I see storytelling in two ways. Firstly, storytelling is weaving stories with a longer discourse. So, if I have 30 minutes for a presentation, I'll dedicate 6 minutes to recounting 3 anecdotes within it, each lasting 2 minutes. That's one way of storytelling. The second way of storytelling is a certain narrative structure. It's the previously mentioned formula from problem to solution. Where did this come from? I see 4 elements of a good story. Firstly, the hero. Secondly, the goal the hero is striving for. Thirdly, the enemy that stands in the hero's way. Fourthly, the mentor, that is external help, or in other words, the solution that helps the hero overcome the enemy and reach the goal. The most interesting elements of this 4-part process are the enemy and the mentor. In a business story, the problem is the enemy. The mentor, sometimes called external assistance, is the solution. So let's translate this scheme into a concrete example. Let's assume we want to convince the company's management to increase the budget of our HR department. We can do it according to such a scheme, from problem to solution. The hero is our department. The goal is to provide value to the company. The enemy is problems related to challenges in the HR industry, higher employee turnover, a small talent pool, low team morale. The mentor or solution is the proposal we submit to the management. to increase the department's budget by amount of X. With this amount, we are able to A. Increase employee benefits so we can compete with other employers and thus reduce employee turnover. B. Participate in job fairs among students so we can acquire contacts to young talents. And C. Organize a team-building trip which will translate into better team relations and thus better cooperation. Additionally, we can emphasize that the total cost increasing the department's budget are still lower than the estimated cost that will arise if the mentioned problems deepen. Thus, the entire narrative is focused on the axis from problem to solution. This scheme has been working for years and is used by the greatest communicators masters. Just one mention of one of the best examples. Steve Jobs and the launch of the iPhone in 2007. Jobs didn't start his presentation by showing the iPhone and listing all its benefits. He started by showing the current situation, that is, by illustrating the problem. He showed several competitor smartphones and said, "The problem with them is that they have a built-in keyboard, whether we want it or not. But what if we want to introduce a completely new application with a completely different configuration? We can't change the keyboards because they are already built in." For a good minute and a half, Jobs mocked the problems of the smartphones of his time. He pointed out that they were impractical. However, we didn't discuss countless negatives. He focused on one key aspect, on one problem: the built-in keyboard. Only when he was sure that the audience confirmed his diagnosis did he move on to the solution. He showed the iPhone, which was the perfect answer to all the previously mentioned problems. The effect? The audience cheered in admiration. Jobs thus structured his presentation in the scheme problem, solution, benefits. However, the most interesting part was focused on the from problem to the solution. This is the best example of business storytelling we have at our fingertips. For this reason, I recommend everyone to watch not necessarily the entire, but the first 10 minutes of Steve Jobs' presentation from the iPhone launch. It's a true storytelling masterpiece. It's available on YouTube. Just type Steve Jobs presentation iPhone 2007. During one of the recent presentation training sessions I conducted, I heard those words about storytelling. Storytelling is for showmen, for those who like to shine in the spotlight, are charismatic, have a natural ease of storytelling. However, we are not showmen, we don't have such skills, the ease of throwing anecdotes, arousing emotions. The participant expressed what many people think, that storytelling is the domain of extroverts. Storytelling is something for people who like to shine in the spotlight. Storytelling is the domain of charismatic speakers and leaders. Meanwhile, storytelling, I want to emphasize this clearly, is not showmanship. It works great as a tool used also by introverts. Let's look at storytelling differently. It's simply bringing up real-life examples that confirm our thesis. In well-functioning organizations, it works like this. First, we show numerical data, for example, charts, tables. Then we look for an anecdote that confirms the general thesis from the presented data. So, the anecdote, a form of storytelling, is an argument that concretizes the numbers. This anecdote doesn't have to be told with a great emphasis or a passion. It should be just told just like we are talking to a friend. A few months ago, I read a book by former Amazon managers Colin Breyer and Bill Carr, Working Backwards insights, stories, and secrets from inside Amazon. The authors mentioned that it was anecdotes that had a huge impact on implementing ideas at Amazon. Quoting from memory, "Numbers alone don't add much. They show a general picture, but only when this picture is concretized through the story of a customer who had such and not other case, do we understand the situation much better. It's the anecdote, not the numbers, that make the team more motivated to act, to change the currently poorly functioning mechanisms." So let's not treat storytelling as a magical wand destined only for real stage magicians. Let's treat it as one of many tools in our communication toolkit. A tool supporting the message, a tool evoking emotions, a tool that convinces most effectively. You don't have to shine on stage to support yourself with an anecdotal example. Just speak in a similar way to how we talk about something over a coffee.